are they going to like me? I mean, it felt more like walking down the halls of my high school than walking into a networking event. But all that fear of, are they going to think my business is silly? Are they going to like me? Are they going to talk to me? Is it going to be, who's going to be there? And I almost turned around. I did turn around to leave, and then realized if I did leave, I would never go in the room and I would have to get another job. And that pain was far greater. We have to be aware that what we're doing holds us back. And then we have to acknowledge the impact that may have on us.
This is the Energy Within podcast, all about accessing, nurturing, and building your energy and confidence so that you can design your life the way you want. My name is Carrie Jokala. I am your host. I am a Reiki practitioner, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys, and this episode is with Stacey Shipman of Engage the Room. She also hosts a podcast called Shed the Formality. And I'm really excited to bring her to you today because we have an amazing conversation all about essentially being yourself in every environment, in every aspect of your life. Her focus is on helping business owners, people in the corporate world, just in that business world, network and build relationships. But it filters down as well to just your day-to-day human interactions. So even if you're not an entrepreneur, I still encourage you to listen to this episode because there is still so much to gain from it. We talk so much, like I said, about learning how to be yourself. And that is important in every part of your life. She talks about how we don't need to have these 2 personas, our daily at home with family and friends persona, and then our work persona, our business persona. We're one person, and there's no reason to have that split. We talk about some amazing things like giving yourself permission. That whole topic of permission, we have a really great conversation around that, and I can't wait for you to hear that part. We talk about creativity and just remembering that we're all humans. Even behind a business, there are humans. And that's why we connect, especially today, with certain businesses. That's why we do business with certain people, is not necessarily strictly because of the product or service, but because of the person. In fact, this ties in a little bit. I recently was having a conversation with some people who take my group exercise classes and talked about how important the instructor and the instructor's personality is to a certain class. One person told me a certain class that's pretty hard. It's a HIIT class. It's short, but it's very intense. She said, I would never come to this class if you weren't the instructor. So I don't say this to toot my own horn, but just to show you that I know that it's because I'm being myself. I'm just showing up and being a goofball and not worrying about what anyone thinks of me. I'm just there to help people get a good workout, of course, but entertain and help people take their minds off what's going on. Give them the energy to go and do the things that they need to do to be successful in their own lives. And I want you to know that whatever it is that you are doing in your life, you are going to impact people in that same way where they are going to show up for something because it's you. So you need to start showing up as you. I won't ramble on for too long because we get deeper into all of these topics within the interview. So I really hope you like this one. If you do, please go ahead and share it, send it to a friend, take a screenshot, take a screen flow, post it to your social media, and let us know what resonates with you. Here we go. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have this talk with you.
Oh, thanks, Carrie. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Why don't you start off by just telling everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So Stacey Shipman, I live in Massachusetts, just south of Boston, and my business is Engage the Room. So my goal is to really make things like speaking, networking, running a meeting, any of those human interactions that can feel sometimes awkward and uneasy for people, to make them feel more natural, because that's really how I think we grow. We grow personally, but also we interact with people every day. And it's the relationships we have that allow us to get work done. So I want to make that easier for people. And I host events, networking events and conferences. I work individually with folks and do group programs.
So what got you started in doing this?
My own developmental needs to learn how to do those activities better. Honestly, because my career started behind the scenes. I was in corporate marketing and research specifically. So I was doing survey design and focus groups and analyzing all of that information. It was all qualitative in nature, but I never had to. I think I gave one presentation in the 10 years that I was in corporate, and I definitely thought about getting a new job before I had to give that presentation. That's how nerve-wracking it was for me. But I was not interacting with clients. I was not a salesperson. I didn't have to give presentations. Everything was very behind the scenes, head down, do your work and pass it off to somebody else. So when I left corporate in 2006 to start my own business, all of a sudden I was no longer behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And that's a very, very different place to be. And that really was the start for me. Although I did start my journey entrepreneurially in wellness as a fitness instructor, trainer, yoga teacher, the more I put myself out there with shaky knees and a racing heart, the more I realized that it wasn't enough to be visible. I had to learn how to communicate my message, build relationships, stay in touch with people. And that's really where the journey began. And doing what I do today has truly been an evolution. I can't say I chose it. It chose me.
Yeah,
is how I look at it. Because as I developed my skills, people started to ask me to help them develop theirs, which was not something I ever expected. But that's how it worked. I've had a ton of entrepreneurial projects over the years, typically event and networking and relationship building focused. So that's really where the evolution to Engage the Room came from.
What was the first thing that you looked to help you start building these concepts, these relational...
the skills?
Yeah.
Well, the first entry point really was when I quit my job. My husband, who had at the time was working in corporate, but he started his career as an entrepreneur. So he already knew this, but he told me, if you want to build a business, you have to network. And up until that point, I had never heard that word. I had never heard that word before. It was not something I ever had to do. So I Googled it, as a lot of people might, and I found a local organization that was hosting a luncheon. I signed up and I went. And although I was super excited as I approached the door to go into the function room, I nearly had a panic attack as I was walking in. The nerves and the thoughts, and my body was shaking. And, it was all about, are they going to like me? I mean, it felt more like walking down the halls of my high school than walking into a networking event. But all that fear of, are they going to think my business is silly? Are they going to like me? Are they going to talk to me? Is it going to be, who's going to be there? And I almost turned around. I did turn around to leave, and then realized if I did leave, I would never go in the room and I would have to get another job. And that pain was far greater. So that was really my first step in. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. I just got curious and hungrier, and said yes to all sorts of opportunities, no matter how much my heart raced, no matter how hard my knees knocked together. But that was really, for me, that's what it's always been about, is doing the work. When it matters, I step in and I do the work. And that's what I did in this case too. And then it's had a lot of steps since then.
I think that's such a big problem for so many people, is when it gets scary like that and they're faced with, that next big scary thing that they know they should do, but the heart starts racing and the palms get sweaty and all the thoughts start coming into their head. They talk themselves down. I think more people than not would turn around and say, forget it. So was it just that kind of drive you had in you where you knew you had to do it regardless that made you do it? Or how would you help someone who would otherwise turn out of the room? How would you help them switch their mindset?
Well, it starts with awareness. You have to be aware that this is even a problem. And again, as I said, in that moment, I did turn around and I was ready to get back in the car and go home. And then another thought came in, which said, if you don't go in now, you're never going to go in. And I knew that to be true. And the pain of getting another job was far greater. So we have to be aware that what we're doing holds us back. And then we have to acknowledge the impact that may have on us personally. So our own stress levels and anxiety levels, but also in the work that we want to do, in the impact that we want to have, the money we want to make, the business or team we want to grow, whatever your role is. What's the impact that hiding, as I call it, has on all areas of your life? And if it's impacting it in ways that are not satisfactory to you, then we have to be able to step in and do something. But until you're even aware of it and can acknowledge that what's happening is not good enough, then we tend to play it safe.
One thing I've heard that I think has been helpful is looking at whatever you are doing, like whatever it is that's holding you back, what you're doing that continues to hold you back, and starting to talk about, well, how is that serving you? How is that serving you right now and keeping you comfortable that where you keep doing it? Because then people think, well, I want better. Well, do you actually? Because you're doing something that's serving you right now that in some way is keeping you comfortable, even if it's not really what you say you want. Right. So yeah, it goes back to that awareness that you were talking about.
Yeah. And there's value in, there's value in safety. Right? So if we're hiding and we're not, because putting ourselves out there is, at least for me, it's been the most vulnerable thing I've ever done. Right. Especially as a business owner, they're my ideas, they're my programs, they're my events. And if people judge it, criticize it, don't want to come to it, it feels like a personal hit. Right. So it's even though it's not, so it's very vulnerable, and there's value in staying safe because now we don't get hurt. We don't have to, see what the negative judgment or criticism might be. There's value in that. Until there isn't, until it's too much and it's, you're on a hamster wheel, basically. Yeah. At least this is how it has played out for me. And I just kept churning over the same ideas over and over because I wasn't doing anything with them. And that became frustrating. So we have to dance with it a little bit. Yeah. But there's all different ways we hide and keep ourselves safe.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your topic of shedding the formalities when we're interacting with each other, whether it's in a business type of relationship or just a normal human interaction. Why don't you start by explaining what you mean by shedding the formalities?
So formalities to me is beliefs and behaviors that we've learned or experienced over the years, whether taught by family beliefs or past experiences, or in the corporate world, if that's the world that you come from, or any work that we've done, really. There are beliefs and behaviors that can often come from others and or that we create for ourselves that don't always serve us. And it speaks a little bit to what we were just talking about in terms of safety and playing it safe and things like that. And I use safe very deliberately versus small and big. Okay. Because I don't think we have to play big to have an impact, but I think but playing it safe isn't always the best approach. Yeah. Anyway, so there are these beliefs and behaviors that hold us back, and they can be super simple. When I work with folks, say on public speaking, I've had clients who tell me, well, I really want to do more speaking, but I don't want to have to use PowerPoint, and all these places require me to use PowerPoint. And I look at them and I say, if you don't want to use PowerPoint, don't use the PowerPoint. It can be that simple of a behavior, but it feels really big. And they often look back at me, I can think of one person in particular. So but they told me that they need it. I said, you're in charge here. Like, it's your speaking, it's your message. And if you are trying to do the best job for them, and that means no PowerPoint, you tell them, in order for me to do the best job for you, I don't use PowerPoint. Here's what I do instead to make this a meaningful experience. And just that shift alone, PowerPoint for me and for a lot of people is a formality that feels stiff and restraining and awkward, because now are you talking to a slide or are you talking to the people? So that's a very simple formality that I see a lot in my work. Another one, as it pertains to networking, is this notion that how we are personally, say with friends or family, is different than how we are professionally. Mm-hmm. And I call BS on that. Absolutely. Because whether you're in a business setting or a friend or family setting, you're the same person.
Right.
That's who you are. And we have to stop thinking that there's this separate part of us. We are multifaceted people with a lot of dimensions. And when we get labeled in some way, whether it's through a title or introvert, extrovert, or coach, consultant, speaker, whatever it is, it pigeonholes us. Mm-hmm. And we have to be allowed to bring all facets of us to every interaction that we have. So in networking or reaching out to people, there can be formalities. I've heard everything from, I don't want to bother people, to I'm busy and I don't have time to reach out, to I don't know what to say when someone asks me, what do I do? I mean, I've heard every excuse. So those are a couple of examples of kind of external formalities, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And then internally, I think that we all live, a lot of us live with beliefs that we were brought up with that may not be true. So one example from my life is I was brought up with a belief that no one needs to know your business, which is, fine when you're young. But if you're trying to start a business or advance your career and nobody knows how good you are or what you've accomplished or what you're capable of accomplishing on behalf of them, that advice doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. That belief doesn't work. So that was one that I had to shed for myself over the years. So those are a couple of examples. They can be super practical and tactical, like don't use the PowerPoint, or they can be a little bit more belief-oriented that go way back to childhood.
So you think a lot of this goes back to that whole playing it safe idea where we let ourselves feel like we have to show up a certain way, otherwise it's not going to be good enough or people aren't going to take us seriously?
Mm-hmm. I do. I think, in my events that I host now, I do everything online now during the pandemic. But one of the words that's been coming up a lot in my networking events is permission.
Oh, yes.
And when I run my events, the way I facilitate them is I use a lot of breakout rooms and have people, quote unquote, moving around a lot, but talking to a lot of people in smaller groups. And more recently, I've been using a functionality that Zoom allows you to move around on your own. So you set up these breakout rooms, you can label them, and people can move around as they want. And the first time I did it, not a lot of people moved around. And I said, what happened? I could see that you all stayed in the same room. The whole point was move around, talk to people, have different conversations. And the common answer that I heard was, well, I felt bad. Someone was talking and I didn't want to leave. And even though I did want to leave, but I didn't want to leave while they were talking. So the next time I I said, listen, you have permission to leave the Zoom room, even if someone's talking. Mm-hmm. Just quietly leave, go to the next room and see what happens. And after that, people were like, oh, I'm so glad you gave me permission, because it felt, we all knew that it was okay. So there's this permission concept, which I totally get and I resonate with, but I never looked at it that way before recently. And I do think there's something about permission to say, I don't use PowerPoint, permission to say, I'm not, if I'm bothering you, that's on you, not on me, but I feel like reaching out. So there is this permission that we need to be able to give ourselves or feel like we have. And I'm still exploring that because it's come up so recently, but it's an interesting concept.
That is a really interesting concept. And I actually have heard that from a couple other people recently where I've been listening and they've been encouraging people to literally write yourself a permission slip to do whatever it is that you're stopping yourself from doing, or, whatever it is that you're afraid of. Give yourself permission on paper to go and do it. And then when you see it that way or you hear it that way, it's like, oh, well, that's silly. Why didn't I just do it before? It's like we're waiting for somebody else to step in, and we don't even know who that person is or where they're going to come from. But like some magical being has to show up and tell us we have permission. And we got to, you're so right. We got to start telling ourselves we have permission to do these things and to speak up for ourselves and to ask for what we need or reach out to somebody. We don't have to wait. We're just wasting time.
I absolutely agree. Yes. It is a waste of time, and I've wasted a ton of time waiting. And it, for me, it only serves to build resentment and frustration because I'm not vocalizing what it is that I want or need. And we have to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's funny how just that phrase, like, I have permission, or I give myself permission. Like, I can literally feel a weight come off my shoulders. Even now, like, I'm not even having to give myself permission to do anything, but just thinking that phrase, I'm like, I actually feel a little better right now.
And that's a formality that we have to shed, this notion of waiting for permission. And even on my website and my brand story, it says formality weighs a ton. So what you just said about feeling lighter is when we can shed these beliefs and behaviors that hold us back. It does feel lighter because we're owning our own power more.
Yeah. So once we have that awareness and we're aware that something's holding us back, or we're aware that we need to start giving ourselves permission, whatever it is, what is the next step? Like, how does someone who has been holding themselves back and they've been afraid, now that they're aware, what next?
I think there's probably one more level of permission, and that's permission to be be messy and whatever comes next, because stepping into this, at least for me, it's been really messy at times. I mean, there's been great celebration. There's been crying. There's been healing. There's been a whole host of emotions and actions and lessons that come with this process. And it's been so permission to be messy and make mistakes and learn from them. I want to make sure is part of this process. But after that, honestly, I know it sounds so simple. From my journey and what I offer people is the opportunity to step in and do the work. So for me, I joined Toastmasters. I signed up for a women's networking organization. I went to all the events, to keep putting myself out there. A year later, found myself on their board of directors. So in the ranks, I joined committees because I found being on committees gave me permission to introduce myself to people in a slightly different way. So these were all baby steps, because I will caution that doing it that way forever is still hiding.
Okay, yeah.
On behalf of another organization. But these were all baby steps that I took. I hired coaches that could help me through it. Life coaches, business coaches, marketing coaches, public speaking coaches. I mean, you name the type of coach and I've probably worked with them. But I said yes to me, but I said yes to the opportunities to put myself out there, to be vulnerable, to make those mistakes, to get messy. I took on a lot of different, I took my own ideas and did something with them. Sometimes I pulled the plug on them, but every step taught me something more about myself. It identified more of what was holding me back that I had to shed, and allowed me to figure out what lessons and insights and wisdom I would continue to take with me. So there is a letting go, and there are some things that you want to hold on to because they work. But for me, it's been stepping in, and the support is really key. Having, whether it's a coach or mentors or a mastermind group or a group coaching program, whatever that support looks like at home and in business, also huge. Because sometimes we're so close to our own stuff, we need someone else to ask us questions.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in taking action and learning from the action.
I think too, with this whole starting messy idea, I think it just needs to be reiterated so much for some people that it's really probably not going to be as scary as you're making it out to be. And once you do it, you'll have that realization like, oh, well, that wasn't that bad. I could do that again. Or maybe it was that bad. And you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that. How do we tweak that? And now you've learned. Now you know what didn't work. So now you can pivot and try something else and keep moving forward with those baby steps.
Right. And that's what growth is. And if we're not growing, I mean, if we're Wayne Dyer, who was a personal development guru way back, and his first book in the 70s, which I never even read the whole book because I got to this one section early on and it was exactly what I needed. But he talks about looking under a microscope at a rock versus a piece of coral. And when you look at the rock, it's not moving because it's not a living thing. But when you look at the coral, it's constantly moving and evolving and changing because it's a living organism. And that's what we are. Well, as soon as I read that, because I've been told over the years, and this is something else, this is why support is so important. I've tried so many things. I mean, I come from a market research background. It's very data oriented, very logical. And I came out to start my own business. And all of a sudden the creative side of me, I was like, oh, there's so many opportunities here. I could, the creative problem solving versus the data problem solving. And to a lot of people looking in, they're like, what's Stacey up to now? Your actions, you're stressing me out with all of the things that you're trying to do. And I internalized some of that in the beginning because I didn't have the confidence to stand on my own 2 feet and say, that's your problem. Like, I'm trying to solve problems. I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm doing things. So I internalized a lot of that. But reading this passage in his book made me realize, no, this is not, I'm not the, I mean, people actually said, you're like, what crazy things are you up to?
Oh no.
I'm like, that's not me. Like, this is on you. And if you can't see that action equals growth and that as humans, we're constantly evolving, I can't own that. And that takes a huge level of being able to stand firmly in who you are and what you believe, and also having the support around you to say you're not alone.
And that point about not internalizing all of that or taking things personally when people say no or they ask you weird questions or they make those statements like people were making to you, not taking that personally and just, like you said, that's your problem. That's not mine. I'm here doing my thing. And if it doesn't work for you, you have permission to go away. Because I have permission to do my thing. So
right. It's true. And it was, at least for me, I'm in the Boston area. We're very Boston area. Have you ever been to Boston?
I have not. I've wanted to go there, but we haven't gone yet.
I love Boston. Highly educated, there's a lot of financial services, a lot of health tech, a lot of pharmaceutical. I mean, a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff happens in Boston. But because I think there's a lot of that, there's also a lot of entrepreneurship. But where I am, there weren't a lot of people who understood the creativity of entrepreneurship or seeing things differently, or that there are different business models out there or different ways of doing business that for a long time, I didn't have that support. There were no role models to look at. I just didn't know where to look. I didn't know where to go. There's nobody doing what I'm trying to do. Where do I go? Am I nuts for trying to do it this way? So I just want people to know that it's okay to have ideas. It's okay to do something with them. It's okay to pull the plug on them as long as you learn from them and have a really good reason for pulling the plug. Like, I pulled the plug on most of my projects because financially I couldn't make them work. But now I find myself coming back to some of them in new ways, evolved ways, more powerful ways, with a new look at the financial part of it. So it has to work for you, but it's okay to pull the plug and learn and adjust and take a new direction. Because if you're taking action on your own ideas, growth is inevitable. You will not be the same person after you've taken action that you were before.
Yeah. And you might get so far and realize that it's just not the right thing. It's not aligning anymore. It's not turning out to be what you thought it was going to be. And there's no one telling you that you have to stay stuck there and continue on that if it's no longer right.
Well, there might be people telling you that.
Well, touche. But there's nobody you have to listen to
well,
other
you don't
than
have
yourself.
to listen to that. Yeah. Well, but even you, Carrie, you changed the name of your podcast.
Right.
And you changed that because it felt more in alignment with where you're going and who you are now. And it's okay to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to do that. Because a lot of what I fell into was hearing, but you're so good at teaching yoga and you're so good at, doing X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't feel like it really fits what I, who I am really and what I want to do. So we have to be able to quiet the external noise.
Yeah.
And tune into ourselves, which I know is up your alley.
Absolutely.
In the energy world. But I still practice yoga and meditation. Those are my grounding practices to get that quiet, and reflective journaling to get the answers, because it's a noisy world. So we all have that. I think we all have that answer inside of us if we're willing to take the time to get quiet.
I keep getting these messages. Someone else that I interviewed yesterday mentioned about automatic writing as a process to figure out next steps and get answers. And now you mentioned the reflective journaling. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'll start doing it. I hear you.
Loud and clear. It's coming through.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole creativity aspect because it made me think about the whole human aspect of all of these relationships and growing a business, and that it's humans building these businesses. It's not robots. It's not AI. It's not like maybe they're involved in your business, but it's still a human building the business, having the ideas, putting things in place. And the way we should, in my opinion, do business is as humans, building relationships, not going out there and putting on that facade, those formalities, and being, the salesperson trying to, I don't know, I don't want to use the wrong words here, but, just being so formal and not being ourselves when we interact with people. Because if we think about, especially today, people that we might follow or businesses that we buy from, interact with, it's typically because we connect with whoever is the face of that company, whether that's the exact owner or if it's someone who's representing it, but we've made a human connection there. And I think that's so important to remember that that's why we need to be ourselves rather than having these two separate personas.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that came to light for me just last summer during the early days of the pandemic, because all the business I had, I lost all the business I had booked because it was all in person when the pandemic started. So I was forced to reevaluate and take a look at how I was going to emerge from this. And once I did that, one of the things I did was I hired a brand messaging copywriter to reinvigorate my message and how I would emerge. And it really, working on that process with her was unbelievable. She was amazing. And she calls it Uncaging Your Epic Credential. And I ended up with this brand story. And as I read it for the first time since I've been out on my own for 15 years, I had that click and I said, oh, someone reads this. They're either going to say, yes, sign me up, or they're going to say, oh my God, no way. There's no way I can do that. I can't shed formalities. And that was really powerful and calming and settling, because I knew from a sales process that I wasn't going to have to stifle myself anymore. I was like, here's what it is. I have this document now and it's on my website and you can read it. And if you haven't read it, let me give you the highlights. And if that fits for you, great. And if it doesn't, maybe I know somebody that's going to be a better fit. But knowing exactly from a business perspective, even personally, what you value, what you believe, what you do, what you offer the world, and then having the words to describe that in a way that nobody else is describing it is super powerful. Because nobody else is talking about shedding formalities. Though they are now because I started the conversation. Right. But if you look at my website, even though a lot of what I do is around communication, it's about relationship building. I don't think communication shows up on my website one time. And if it does, maybe one time.
Mm-hmm.
But as you read it, that's a part of what I do.
Yeah.
It's help people communicate their message better. So it was really powerful, and it makes that sales process makes it easier.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have to conform to what they want.
Right. Yeah.
You offer what you have, and they can be attracted to that or not.
And I think it helps when you have that set where you're so sure about who you are and what you do that it's easier to not take it personally then when someone isn't ready for it or they say no or it's just not for them, because then you realize like, well, it can't be about me because, this is what I do and it just didn't fit for them. And it's easier to let that roll off and move on to the next person who is raising their hand over here and saying, please work with me.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easier too. I've had a couple comments from some people on social media where I'm just like, why would you even say that when it relates to like, my Reiki or anything like that? But I'm so solid in like, this is my path. This is what I do. I know that I have evidence that I help people with this. Mm-hmm. So I don't care or need your opinion. Be on your way. And I'm going to move on to the next person who could actually be helped by me. So,
right. Good for you. Yeah. And I will say social media, I think, is such because I wonder if that person would have ever said it to your face. Yep. Whatever they said, would they say it to your face? Right. Probably not.
It's so easy to hide behind that computer screen.
Well, we were talking about permission. I think social media gives a negative permission.
Right.
And this is not permission in a positive way,
right.
but gives people permission to say whatever they want to say because there's no face behind it.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, we're humans talking to humans, but when you put a social platform in between that, we forget that there's a heart on the other side.
Right. Yeah. Because you're not seeing their face. You're not seeing or hearing their immediate reaction like you would in person. So it's easier to just drop whatever's going through your mind and run away.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So
you turn off your comments. You don't even have to go back to the notifications and just let everybody else run wild.
Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with social media.
Yeah, same. I think we've kind of covered the main topics that I wanted to hit on. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel would be important to the conversation?
I think that what I always tell people is your presence is a gift and the world needs your ideas. So keep showing up as the person that you are. And that requires, that takes work. We have to peel back the layers. We have to peel back all of these beliefs and behaviors and formalities, if you will, that we've learned that don't serve us anymore, that don't allow us to really shine the way we want to shine. And what I loved about the name of your podcast, Carrie, Energy Within, is that's where it starts.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the energy that you're carrying? What are you saying about yourself? What do you see when you look in the mirror? It starts there. And if you're not seeing positive, confident person staring back at you, and not that we're that all the time. I mean, it ebbs and flows.
Absolutely.
But if you're looking in the mirror and you're not kind to yourself on a pretty regular basis, how can you expect that energy to flow out?
I love that. Can I use you as my new intro for my podcast?
Yeah, I'll give you a good deal on that. But it's true. It starts there.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say there's a little part of that makes me a little sad that we have to work at being ourselves. Like just that topic by itself, you look at it and think, well, it just shouldn't be that way. Why? It shouldn't be that hard to be yourself. But that's actually a topic I've tried to address a couple of times. But the fact is, it is difficult to show up as ourselves because of these formalities. So it's a great light, and it's helpful to know that there are people like you out there who are helping to show the way so that people can step into their true selves and own their power and live their lives the way they should be lived.
Thank you. And to you as well, because I know you said, I could talk about this forever.
Right.
The other piece of this that's also super important, and this is where someone like yourself hosting a podcast like this, me hosting my podcasts and my events, is that we as individuals, Carrie, can teach people different skills, or you can do Reiki and healing for the individual. I mean, we can do this all day long. And we also need the environment to say it's okay to show up as who you are.
Yeah.
And if the environment doesn't support that, then all the work that we've done
right
doesn't get to flourish. And so you need both. You need the individual to do the work, and you need the environment to support that.
Right. And that automatically makes me think, a lot of times my examples go back to some of the jobs that I've worked, and there was one particular environment that I worked in where I remember specifically, doing all the personal development work. I'd listen to, I don't think podcasts were a thing yet at the time, but like I'd have, CDs or other things that I would listen to that were motivational and uplifting and stuff like that. Listen to that on the way to work. I would try to do some meditation, and I'd be all like pumped and in a good mood. But as soon as I opened the door to that physical environment, I was just like, whoosh, there went everything that I just did. None of it matters. None of it's carrying through. Like, here we go. So I like that you mentioned that. It is important to be aware of what your environment is, and even who you're surrounding yourself with, who you're allowing into your space, and what they're saying to you
and how they're making you feel. And
right.
That energy, the energy can be self-generated, but it's also other-generated.
Right. Yeah. I think this has been a very deep and very important and very awesome conversation. So thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this with us.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity, Carrie.
Yeah. Why don't you let everyone know how they can find you and connect with you?
Sure. My website's engagetheroom.com. The podcast is Shed the Formality. It's on all the apps. And we talk a lot about this, how to step into who you are and creating the environments that we need to do that. And if you're curious about an environment that supports you, I invite you to check out my networking events. They're open to all business owners and leaders who are looking for that space to connect and share ideas.
Awesome.
And you can find that on my website.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Stacey. This has been really great.
Thank you.
That was a fun conversation. I am so glad to have connected with Stacey, and I hope you got so much out of our conversation together. The thing that really drew me to Stacey and wanting to bring her on the podcast was that idea of shedding formalities and learning how to be yourself. And like I said, I feel like it's a little sad that we even have this idea that we have to learn how to be ourselves, because it shouldn't be that way. But unfortunately, it is that way. So what do we do about it? I think that's where we need to go from there, is rather than be sad about it, figure out, what do we do about it? How do we get to that next step? How do we get to that place where we are comfortable being ourselves? So if you feel drawn to Stacey's message and you feel like she would be the one to help you take these steps forward, please reach out and connect with her. I would like to invite you, as always, to connect further with me as well and jump into my Facebook group if you're not already in there. That is also called The Energy Within. We do some group Reiki in there. We do live card pulls. I invite you to jump in and do a Reiki session with me. If you enjoyed this episode, if you got anything from it, please share it. Take a screenshot, do a screen flow, grab some audio, share it to your social media, tag me, tag Stacey, let us know what you liked, what resonated with you, and let me know what you need more of. I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you for being on this journey with me. I love you. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.